There's a strange kind of prison that doesn't have any walls, locks, or guards standing watch. It exists only in the mind, built out of something that happened once, long ago, and yet it holds people back for decades, even after the thing that created it is completely gone. If you've ever felt stuck in a limitation you can't quite explain, one that makes no sense anymore but still feels absolutely real, this story is for you. There was a woman named Grace who worked at a small traveling circus, caring for the animals behind the scenes. Among them was a massive elephant named Samson, easily strong enough to uproot trees or snap thick steel chains without much effort at all. And yet, every single night, Samson stood calmly beside a small wooden stake driven into the ground, tied to it with a thin rope that could barely hold a large dog. Grace found this strange from her very first week working there. One evening, she asked Marcus, the circus's oldest handler, why such a powerful animal never simply pulled the stake out and walked away. Marcus smiled, the way people do when they already know the answer to a question someone else is just beginning to ask. When Samson was very small, he explained, they tied him to that exact same stake with that exact same rope. Back then, he was weak enough that no matter how hard he pulled, the rope held. He tried for days, until his energy was completely gone. And eventually, he simply stopped trying. But he's fully grown now, Grace said. He could snap that rope without even noticing. He could, Marcus agreed. But Samson doesn't know that anymore. All he remembers is the feeling of pulling against that rope as a baby and it never once giving way. So now, whenever he feels that same slight resistance around his leg, some part of him quietly concludes this cannot be broken, and he stops pulling, long before he ever discovers that everything about him has changed since the last time he tried. Grace couldn't stop thinking about Samson that night. Not because of anything unusual about elephants, but because the story felt uncomfortably familiar. Years earlier, Grace had tried to start her own small business, nothing extravagant, just a modest bakery she had dreamed about since she was young. She poured her savings, her evenings, and her hope into it. But within 18 months, due to circumstances mostly outside her control, it failed completely. She lost her investment, and worse, she lost something quieter and harder to name, her belief that she was someone capable of building something successful. In the years since, she had been offered several opportunities to try again, a partnership here, a small loan there. Each time, a quiet voice inside her said she already knew how this ends and told her not to. And each time, she believed that voice completely, without questioning it, the same way Samson believed the rope was still unbreakable. Watching Samson stand there, calmly accepting a limitation that no longer had any power over him, Grace realized something uncomfortable. She wasn't actually afraid of failing again. She was still responding to a stake driven into the ground years ago, by a version of herself with far less experience, skill, and resilience than the person she had since become. That night, she asked Marcus if anyone had ever tried to show Samson that he's strong enough now, that the rope isn't what it used to be. Marcus nodded slowly. It's happened before, with other elephants, in other circuses. It's not usually a dramatic moment. Someone simply keeps gently encouraging the animal to take one more small step than it believes it can. Not a violent pull, just one honest, uncertain step past the point where it always used to stop. And the moment the elephant discovers the rope gives way, the entire belief collapses at once. Not because it became stronger in that moment. It had already been strong enough for years. Grace sat with that thought for a long time, turning it over quietly in her mind. The following week, almost without fully deciding to, she said yes to one small opportunity she would have automatically declined before, nothing as large as reopening her own bakery, just a modest offer to help design the menu for a friend's new coffee shop. It wasn't a bold leap. It was simply one honest step further than the voice inside her usually allowed. Nothing dramatic happened. No sudden success, no instant transformation. But something quieter shifted. She noticed the sky didn't fall. Her old failure didn't repeat itself the way she had assumed it always would. And for the first time in years, she began to wonder what else that old rope had been convincing her was impossible, simply because it had once been true, a long time ago, to a much younger, much less capable version of herself. Before Grace eventually moved on from the circus, she asked Marcus if there was a way to help someone truly break free from a limitation like that. He offered her 3 simple truths. The first, the rope was real once, but that doesn't mean it's real now. Most of our limitations were true at some point, a fear that once protected us, a failure that once genuinely defined our skill level. The mistake is assuming that because something was true then, it must still be true today, without ever testing it again. The second, breaking free rarely requires a dramatic pull. It usually just requires one small, honest step past the edge of where you normally stop, simply to gather new evidence for yourself that the old rope may not hold the way it used to anymore. The third, you are not the same version of yourself who first accepted that limitation. Whether it's been 1 year or 20, you have grown and changed in ways the original belief never accounted for. Continuing to obey an old rope means ignoring everything you've become since the day it was first tied. Grace never became famous, and her friend's coffee shop was never anything extraordinary. But something in her had permanently shifted. She had finally tested a rope she had assumed, for years, was simply unbreakable, and discovered it wasn't. It had just never been tested by the person she had already become. So if there's a stake somewhere in your past, an old failure, an old rejection, an old version of already knowing how this ends, ask yourself honestly. Is that rope actually still there? Or are you simply standing still, out of habit, in front of a limitation that stopped being true a long time ago? If this story reminded you of a rope you're ready to finally test, hit like and subscribe for more stories like this every week. And tell me in the comments what's one old belief about yourself that might not be true anymore. See you in the next story.